I built this house for her, and she fills it with someone else.
The rain hammered my windshield like bullets as I sat in my rusted Ford pickup, watching the neon lights of the Silver Dollar Casino reflect red across the wet asphalt. My phone buzzed with another voicemail from my wife Sarah, but I didn't need to listen to know what she'd say. The same lies she'd been feeding me for months. Danny's just helping me with the books, Mike. You know I'm terrible with numbers. Danny, my wife's cousin, the same piece of garbage who'd been living in our guest room for 6 months, supposedly getting back on his feet after losing his job at the auto plant. The same Danny who drove a brand new Camaro while claiming he was broke. The same Danny who smirked every time I walked into my own house. I built that house with my own hands 15 years ago, back when Sarah and I were happy. Back when she looked at me like I was her hero instead of an obstacle. I was a contractor then, had my own crew, made decent money building homes for families who actually truly cared about each other. Now, I worked construction for other people, taking whatever jobs I could find in this dying town. The 2008 recession had ended my business, but I'd survived. Sarah and I had survived, or so I thought. My phone rang. Sarah's picture flashed on the screen, a photo from our anniversary 2 years ago, back when she still smiled at me without that cold calculation in her eyes. Mike, where are you? Dinner's getting cold. I'm working late again. Tell Danny he can start without me. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Danny's not here. He went to see about a job interview. Through the casino's glass doors, I could see Danny at a blackjack table, a blonde in a tight dress hanging on his arm. The same blonde I'd seen him with last week at Murphy's bar. The same blonde who'd been posting photos with him on social media while my wife defended his honor. That's great, Sarah. Hope it works out for him. Mike, we need to talk when you get home. About us. About everything. My stomach dropped. Those words. Every married man knows those words mean the end of everything you've built, everything you've sacrificed for. I'll be home soon. I hung up and sat there watching Danny blow a kiss to his girlfriend before heading back to the poker room. My phone buzzed with a text from my buddy Tom Jenkins, who worked security at the casino. Your boy Danny just dropped $3,000 at my table. Thought you should know. $3,000. More than I made in a good month. More than Sarah and I had in our savings account. More than we had for the mortgage payment that was already 2 weeks late. I drove home through streets I'd known my whole life. Past the shuttered factories and boarded up shops that used to be the heart of this town. Past Murphy's bar, where I used to drink with my crew after long days. Past the high school where Sarah and I had met 23 years ago. Our house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest 2-story with a wraparound porch I'd designed myself. The windows glowed warm and yellow against the storm, but there was nothing warm about what waited inside. Sarah was in the kitchen, her auburn hair pulled back, wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for Christmas. She was beautiful at 41, more beautiful than the day I married her. But her green eyes held something I'd never seen before. Pity mixed with impatience. Sit down, Mike. I remained standing, my work boots still muddy, my flannel shirt damp from the rain. Where's Danny? He's staying at a friend's place tonight. I asked him to give us some space. Which friend? The blonde from the casino? Sarah's face went white. What are you talking about? I saw him, Sarah, at the Silver Dollar, throwing around money like he owns the place. Money he doesn't have unless he's getting it from somewhere else. You've been spying on him? I've been trying to figure out why my wife defends a man who's draining our resources while living under our roof. Sarah slammed her hand on the kitchen table. Danny's family, Mike. Family helps family. Family doesn't steal from family. He's not stealing anything. I pulled out my phone and showed her Tom's text. $3,000, Sarah. Where's a man with no job getting $3,000 to gamble with? She stared at the screen, her jaw working like she was chewing glass. I don't know. Maybe he had savings. Or maybe he's been taking money from our account. Maybe he's been using our credit cards. Maybe my wife's been helping him do it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like tears of frustration than guilt. I can't do this anymore, Mike. Do what? This, us. Living like we're broke when we don't have to be. My blood turned to ice water. What does that mean? Danny's offered to help us. Really help us. He knows people, Mike. People with money. People who could get you better work, better opportunities. What kind of people? Does it matter? We're drowning here. The mortgage is behind, the truck needs work, and you're too proud to accept help when it's offered. I stared at my wife like she was a stranger. Help from who, Sarah? What aren't you telling me? She turned away, staring out the kitchen window at the rain. Danny's been seeing someone with connections. She could help you get work with the city, maybe even the county. Real steady work with benefits. The blonde from the casino. Her name is Crystal. She works for Judge Harrow. Judge Martin Harrow. I knew the name. Everyone in town knew Judge Harrow. He'd been on the bench for 15 years, had a reputation for being tough on crime and soft on people who could afford good lawyers. He also had a reputation for other things people whispered about but never said out loud. What kind of work does Crystal do for Judge Harrow? Sarah's shoulders sagged. She's his personal assistant. She handles his private affairs. I'll bet she does, I thought. And Danny's dating her. It's not serious, it's just convenient. The word hit me like a slap. Convenient. That's what my marriage had become. That's what I had become. So, let me get this straight. Danny's using his girlfriend's connection to a corrupt judge to get me work, and all I have to do is keep my mouth shut about where he's getting his gambling money. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Sarah? She turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, something cold and calculating and utterly without love. It's like survival, Mike. It's like doing whatever it takes to not lose everything we've worked for. We? You know what I mean? No, I don't think I do. Because everything we've worked for, I built with my own hands. Everything we have, I earned with my sweat. And now you want me to take dirty money from your cousin and his judge's hoe, so we can keep pretending we're something we're not. Sarah's hand cracked across my face so hard my ears rang. Don't you dare call her that. I touched my cheek, feeling the sting, tasting copper where I'd bitten my tongue. Why? Because it's too close to the truth? Get out. This is my house. Get out, Mike. Go to Tom's. Go to Murphy's. Go wherever you want. But get out of my sight before I say something I can't take back. I looked around the kitchen I'd built, at the cabinets I'd installed, at the tile floor I'd laid on my hands and knees, at the woman I'd loved for more than half my life, who was now looking at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. I'll be at Murphy's. When you're ready to tell me the truth, the whole truth, you know where to find me. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Behind me, Sarah was crying, but they sounded like tears of relief. The rain had turned to sleet by the time I reached Murphy's bar. The neon sign flickered and buzzed, casting sick light on the empty parking lot. Inside, the place was nearly empty, except for a few regulars nursing beers and watching a basketball game on the ancient TV above the bar. Tom Jenkins was sitting in our usual booth, a half-empty pitcher of beer in front of him. He looked up when I walked in, took one look at my face, and waved me over. That bad, huh? I slid into the booth and poured myself a beer from his pitcher. Worse. Tom was a good friend, had been since high school. He'd married his sweetheart, bought a house 2 streets over from mine, raised 3 kids who actually respected him. He worked security at the casino, which meant he saw all the town's dirty laundry up close. Tell me about Danny, I said. Tom glanced around the bar, making sure no one was listening. Your wife's cousin? He's been coming in regular for about 3 months. Always has cash, always tips big, always has Crystal Morrison hanging on him. Crystal Morrison, that's Judge Harrow's assistant? Among other things. Tom's expression darkened. Mike, there are things about that situation you probably don't want to know. Try me. Tom sipped his beer, choosing his words carefully. Judge Harrow likes young women. Crystal's job is to make sure he meets them. Danny's job is to find them. The beer turned sour in my mouth. Find them where? Wherever desperate girls go when they need money. The casino, the truck stops, the community college. Girls with addiction struggles, girls with kids to feed. Girls who'll do whatever it takes to pay their bills. I felt sick. And Sarah knows about this? I don't know what Sarah knows, but I know Danny's been throwing around serious cash, and I know where that kind of cash comes from in this town. How serious? He dropped 15 grand last weekend. 15 grand, Mike. In one night. $15,000. More than I made in 6 months. More than Sarah and I had ever had in our savings account at one time. There's something else, Tom said. Danny's been asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Your work schedule, where you go, who you talk to. He wanted to know if you ever came into the casino. A chill ran down my spine. Why would he care about that? Because if you're not around, you can't see what's happening in your own house. The pieces clicked together in my mind like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Danny's sudden appearance 6 months ago. Sarah's new interest in helping him, the money, the lies, the way she'd looked at me tonight like I was the problem. Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Shoot. Has Sarah been to the casino? Tom's silence was answer enough. How often? Mike. How often, Tom? Twice a week for the past month. Always with Danny, always playing at Judge Harrow's private table. Judge Harrow had a private table. Of course he did. A place where he could conduct business away from prying eyes. A place where deals were made and debts were settled. What kind of money are we talking about? The kind that buys houses, Mike. The kind that pays off mortgages and car loans and credit card debt. I finished my beer and stood up. I need to go home. Mike, wait. There's one more thing. I sat back down. Danny's been telling people you're planning to leave town. Says you've been talking about taking a job in Cleveland, starting over somewhere else. I never said anything like that. I know, but other people don't. And if you disappear, who's going to ask questions about what happens to your house, your wife, your life? The bar seemed to spin around me. Everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for was being stolen from under my nose by people I'd trusted, people I'd welcomed into my home. What do I do, Tom? You fight back, but you better do it fast, because I don't think you have much time. I drove home through the sleet, my mind racing. The house was dark, except for the porch light I'd installed myself 3 years ago. Sarah's car was in the driveway, but Danny's Camaro was nowhere to be seen. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, expecting to find Sarah asleep, but the bed was empty. Her side hadn't been slept in. I checked the guest room where Danny had been staying. Empty too, but his clothes were still there. His expensive clothes that no unemployed man should be able to afford. In the back of his closet, I found a shoebox full of cash, hundreds and fifties. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. At least $20,000, maybe more. Under the cash, I found something that made my blood freeze. Photographs, dozens of them. Young women in compromising positions with older men, men I recognized. Judge Harrow, the mayor, the police chief, the bank president, and at the bottom of the box, a photograph that stopped my heart. Sarah, my wife, in Judge Harrow's chambers, doing things I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. I sat on Danny's bed holding that photograph, staring at my wife's face, trying to understand how the woman I'd loved for 23 years had become someone I didn't recognize. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 weeks ago, while I was working a job in the next county. My hands shook as I looked through the rest of the photos. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, control, and destroying everything I'd built. Danny wasn't just stealing from me, he was erasing me. I heard a car in the driveway, Sarah's voice laughing at something. Then Danny's voice, low and confident. They were coming inside. I stuffed the photos back in the box, put it back where I found it, and slipped out the back door. From the shadows beside the garage, I could see them through the kitchen window. Sarah was pouring wine, still wearing that blue dress. Danny was counting money on the kitchen table. My kitchen table, where Sarah and I had eaten breakfast every morning for 15 years, where we'd planned our future, our dreams, our life together. Danny pulled Sarah close, his hands on her waist, and kissed her. Not like a cousin, not like family, like a man who owned her. I wanted to kick down the door and beat him to death with my bare hands. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. The house will be ours by next month, Danny was saying. Harrow's got the paperwork ready. Mike's signature won't be hard to forge. I've been practicing. What about Mike? Sarah's voice was small, uncertain. What about him? He'll be gone. Gone where? Danny's laugh was cold. Does it matter? Guys like Mike disappear all the time in this economy. They get desperate. They make bad choices. They end up in places they can't come back from. Sarah pulled away from him. You said no one would get hurt. No one will get hurt. Mike's just going to relocate. Permanently. I'd heard enough. I slipped back to my truck and drove to Tom's house, my mind reeling. They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to make me disappear. Tom lived in a tidy ranch house with a well-maintained lawn and a workshop in the back where he restored classic cars. His wife, Linda, answered the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and called for Tom. Mike, what's wrong? I showed him the video I'd recorded. Tom's face went white as he listened to Danny's casual talk of forgery and making me disappear. Jesus Christ, Mike, you need to call the police. And tell them what? That my wife's cousin is planning to forge my signature? That my wife is sleeping with a judge? You think anyone in this town is going to go up against Judge Harrow? Tom was quiet for a long moment. So what do you want to do? I want to destroy them. All of them. But I need help. What kind of help? The kind that levels the playing field. Tom studied my face in the dim light of his living room. Mike, I've known you since we were kids. You're not a violent man. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about justice. Sometimes they're the same thing. I spent the night on Tom's couch, staring at the ceiling and planning. By morning, I had the outline of something that might work. It wasn't legal, it wasn't moral, and it would probably destroy what was left of my life. But it would also destroy theirs. The next day was Saturday. I drove to the casino early before the morning shift started. Tom met me in the parking lot with a duffel bag. You sure about this? He asked. I'm sure. Because once we start, there's no going back. There's already no going back, Tom. They made sure of that. Inside the bag were things Tom had borrowed from casino security. Cameras, recording equipment, and something else. A master key card that would get us into Judge Harrow's private gaming room. How'd you get this? Danny's not the only one with connections. I've been working security here for 8 years. I know where the bodies are buried. We spent the morning installing hidden cameras in Judge Harrow's private room. Tom knew the blind spots in casino security, knew when the guards made their rounds, knew how to move through the building without being seen. What's the plan? Tom asked as we finished. Tonight, they're all going to be here. Sarah, Danny, Harrow, and probably half the corrupt officials in town. They think they're untouchable. I'm going to prove them wrong. And then what? Then I'm going to watch their world burn. That evening, I positioned myself in the casino parking lot with a clear view of the entrance. At 8 o'clock, Sarah arrived in her best dress, the black one I'd bought her for our anniversary. She looked beautiful and confident, like a woman who'd never doubted herself. Danny met her at the door, kissing her cheek like they were old friends instead of conspirators. Judge Harrow arrived 15 minutes later in his black Mercedes, followed by the mayor, the police chief, and 3 men I didn't recognize but who looked like they owned everything they touched. I waited another hour, then used Tom's key card to enter through a service door. The casino was busy on Saturday night, full of people losing money they couldn't afford to lose. People like I used to be before I learned that the game was rigged from the start. Tom was waiting for me near the private gaming room. They're all in there, he whispered. Harrow, your wife, Danny, and 4 other guys. High-stakes poker, but that's not what they're really playing. What do you mean? They're dividing up the town, Mike, deciding who gets what when they're done cleaning house. Your house came up about 20 minutes ago. My jaw clenched. What did they say? Danny's keeping it. Sarah's keeping everything else. You're getting a one-way ticket to wherever people go when they know too much. I looked through the one-way glass into the private room. Sarah was sitting beside Judge Harrow, her hand on his arm, laughing at something he'd said. She looked happy, happier than I'd seen her in years. Danny was across the table, dealing cards with practiced ease. He was good at this, I realized. Good at manipulating people, good at reading their weaknesses, good at taking what didn't belong to him. The cameras are recording everything, I asked. Everything. Audio too. Good, because I want the whole world to see what happens next. I walked into the private gaming room like I owned it. The conversation stopped immediately. Sarah's face went white. Danny's hand moved toward something under his jacket. Gentlemen? Sarah. I nodded to each of them in turn. Don't let me interrupt your game. Judge Harrow was the first to recover. Mr. Thompson, I don't believe you were invited to this private gathering. That's funny, Your Honor. Because according to what I've been hearing, you've been making decisions about my life without inviting me either. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Sarah started to stand, but Danny put a hand on her shoulder, keeping her seated. Mike, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. You shouldn't be here. Where should I be, Sarah? At home, waiting for you to come back from your business meeting? In Cleveland, looking for that job I never applied for? Or maybe somewhere more permanent? Danny leaned back in his chair, trying to look relaxed. I don't know what you think you heard, Mike, but I heard enough. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the night before. Danny's voice filled the room, casual and confident. Guys like Mike disappear all the time in this economy. The color drained from Danny's face. Judge Harrow's eyes narrowed. The other men at the table looked like they were calculating the odds of getting out of the room without being seen. "That's enough," Judge Harrow said. "Security." "Security's busy," I said. "Besides, I think these gentlemen would prefer to keep this conversation private. Wouldn't want word getting out about your little arrangement here." I looked around the table, meeting each man's eyes. "Let me guess. You got the mayor here to rezone properties, the police chief to look the other way when necessary, the bank president to approve loans for people who can't afford them, and my wife, well, Sarah's here to provide whatever services Judge Harrow requires." Sarah's face crumpled. "Mike, please." "Please what? Please pretend I don't know you've been selling yourself to pay our bills? Please pretend I don't know Danny's been using our house as a base of operations for Judge Harrow's illicit escort network? Please pretend I don't know you've been planning to steal everything I've worked for and make me disappear?" Judge Harrow stood up. "That's enough. You're obviously disturbed, Mr. Thompson. Delusional. I think you need professional help. What I need is justice. And since you're the one who's supposed to provide that, Your Honor, I guess I'll have to get it myself." Danny's hand moved again toward his jacket. This time I was ready for him. I grabbed a heavy glass ashtray from the side table and brought it down on his wrist. He screamed and pulled his hand back, a small pistol clattering to the floor. "Now that's interesting," I said, picking up the tool. "Carrying a concealed tool in a casino. That's a felony, isn't it, Your Honor?" The room erupted in chaos. The mayor bolted for the door. The police chief was shouting into his radio. Judge Harrow was backing toward the window like he was planning to jump. And Sarah was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "You've ruined everything?" she whispered. "No, Sarah. I've saved everything. Or at least I've saved myself." Tom appeared in the doorway with 2 casino security guards. Real security guards, not the ones on Judge Harrow's payroll. "Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to remain seated while we sort this out," Tom said. "We've got some very interesting video footage that I think the FBI would love to see." Judge Harrow's face went purple. "You have no authority here?" "Actually, I do." Tom showed his badge. "I'm not just casino security, Your Honor. I'm also a federal agent. Have been for 3 years. We've been investigating corruption in this town for a long time, and tonight you've given us everything we need." The next few hours were a blur of handcuffs, Miranda rights, and very serious men in very serious suits asking very serious questions. Judge Harrow, Danny, and the other conspirators were led away in chains. The mayor and police chief would be arrested before morning, and Sarah sat in an interrogation room, crying and trying to explain how she'd gotten caught up in something she didn't understand. But I understood. I understood that the woman I'd loved for 23 years had chosen money over loyalty, excitement over stability, and strangers over the man who'd built her a life with his own hands. Tom found me in the casino parking lot at dawn, sitting in my truck and watching the sunrise. "It's over, Mike." "Is it?" "Judge Harrow's looking at 20 years minimum. Danny's looking at 15. The others will probably plea bargain, but they're done in this town." "What about Sarah?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "She's cooperating, telling us everything she knows about their operation. She'll probably get probation and community service." "And me?" "You're a hero, Mike. You helped bring down the most corrupt political machine this county's ever seen." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who'd lost everything that mattered and gained nothing but revenge. "There's something else," Tom said. "The house, your assets, everything they tried to steal, it's all yours. The courts will make sure of that." I nodded, but it didn't matter. The house was just wood and brick now. Sarah had been what made it a home. "What are you going to do now?" Tom asked. I started my truck and looked back at the casino one last time. Through the windows, I could see cleaning crews mopping up the wreckage of last night's drama. By tonight, it would be like nothing had happened. The games would go on, people would lose money they couldn't afford to lose, and life would continue. But not for me, not here. "I'm going to rebuild," I said. "Somewhere else, something better. Want some company?" I looked at my oldest friend, the man who'd risked his career to help me get justice. "What about Linda? The kids?" "They'll understand. Besides, somebody's got to make sure you don't do anything stupid." I laughed for the first time in months. Too late for that. As I drove away from the Silver Dollar Casino, I could see Sarah in my rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot in her wrinkled black dress, watching me leave. She raised her hand like she was going to wave, then let it fall to her side. 23 years of marriage ended in a casino parking lot at dawn. It wasn't the ending I'd planned, but it was the ending we'd earned. I had Danny's shoebox full of cash in my truck. Evidence that would never be needed now that he'd confessed to everything. $27,000. Enough to start over somewhere else. Enough to build something new. The road stretched ahead of me, empty and full of possibilities. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Behind me, the town that had tried to destroy me was waking up to a new day. A day without Judge Harrow's corruption, without Danny's schemes, without the lies that had poisoned everything I'd once held dear. I'd lost my wife, my home, and my old life, but I'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that I was stronger than the people who'd tried to break me. The sun was rising ahead of me, bright and clean and honest. I drove toward it without looking back. 3 months later, I was living in a small apartment in Columbus, working construction for a company that actually paid its bills on time. The work was honest, the crew was solid, and nobody knew my story unless I chose to tell it. Tom had transferred to the FBI field office there, bringing Linda and the kids. We met for beers every Friday at a sports bar near my apartment, talking about everything except what we'd left behind. But the past has a way of finding you, even when you think you've escaped it. I was working on a commercial project downtown when my phone rang. Sarah's number. I'd changed my number twice, but somehow she'd found the new one. "Mike, please don't hang up." Her voice was different, smaller, broken. "What do you want, Sarah?" "I need to see you. There are things you need to know. Things about what really happened. I know what happened. I was there." "No, you don't. Not all of it. Danny wasn't the one in charge, Mike. He was just following orders." I almost hung up. Almost. But something in her voice stopped me. Fear. Real fear. "Whose orders? I can't talk about this over the phone. Can you come home just for a day? That's not my home anymore." "Please, Mike. People are dead. People who were in that room with us. And I think I'm next." The line went dead. I stood there in the Columbus sunshine, holding my phone and feeling the old familiar chill of dread. People were dead. Sarah was scared. And somehow I was being pulled back into a nightmare I thought was over. Tom wasn't happy when I told him I was going back. "Mike, whatever Sarah's gotten herself into, it's not your problem anymore. She said people were dead. People die every day, usually because of choices they made. What if she's telling the truth? What if there's more to this than we thought?" Tom sighed and pulled out his laptop. "Let me make some calls. If people connected to the Harrow case are dying, we need to know about it." An hour later, Tom's face was grim. 3 people from that poker game are dead, Mike. The bank president died in a car accident 2 weeks ago. The mayor had a heart attack last week, and one of the men I didn't recognize, turns out he was a state senator, was found dead under suspicious circumstances yesterday. That's a lot of coincidences. "Yeah, too many." Tom closed his laptop. "I'm coming with you." "Tom, you don't have to." "Yes, I do, because if Sarah's right and someone's cleaning house, you're probably on their list too." We drove back to our hometown that evening, taking back roads and staying off the interstate. The familiar landscape looked different somehow, like a place I'd seen in a dream but never actually visited. The town looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier. Half the businesses on Main Street were closed. The Silver Dollar Casino was still operating, but the parking lot was nearly empty on a Saturday night. Sarah was waiting for us at Murphy's Bar, sitting in the same booth where Tom and I had planned our revenge 3 months ago. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 months. Her auburn hair was streaked with gray, her green eyes were hollow, and her hands shook when she lifted her coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," she said when we sat down. "Talk," I said. "Judge Harrow didn't end himself in prison." Tom leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone ended him and made it look self-inflicted. Someone who didn't want him talking to federal investigators." "Who?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because it turns out Judge Harrow wasn't running the show. He was just middle management." She pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like financial records. "Danny gave me these before they arrested him. He said if anything happened to him, I should give them to you." "Why me?" "Because you're the only person involved in this mess who can't be bought, threatened, or ended without people asking questions." I looked through the documents. Bank records showing money transfers in the millions. Photographs of meetings between Judge Harrow and men I didn't recognize. And at the bottom, a list of names with dollar amounts next to them. My name was on the list. So was Tom's. So were the names of 3 federal agents I'd never heard of. "What is this?" Tom asked. "It's a hit list," Sarah said. "Everyone who knows too much about the real operation. Judge Harrow's illicit network involving escorts was just a small part of something much bigger." "How much bigger?" "Try human trafficking, money laundering, and political corruption that goes all the way to Washington. Judge Harrow was facilitating the movement of girls across state lines. Danny was recruiting them. She stopped, unable to finish. "You were what, Sarah?" "I was training them, teaching them how to act, how to dress, how to please the kind of men who pay premium prices for premium services." The room seemed to spin around me. My wife hadn't just been sleeping with Judge Harrow for money. She'd been part of a human trafficking operation. "How long?" I asked. 2 years, since Danny first came to stay with us. He said it was temporary, just until we got back on our feet financially. But it was never temporary. It was always the plan. "Whose plan?" Sarah's eyes darted around the bar like she expected assassins to come through the door. "I don't know their real names, but I know they're powerful. They're connected, and they don't leave loose ends." Tom was studying the financial records. "These transfers, they're coming from shell companies in 3 different states. This isn't some local corruption scheme, Mike. This is organized crime." "Which means what?" "Which means we're all in danger until we figure out who's really running this thing." A car backfired in the parking lot, and Sarah jumped like she'd been shot. "They know I'm here. They know I'm talking to you." "Who knows? The people who ended Judge Harrow, the people who ended the others, the people who are going to end me as soon as they figure out what Danny told me." "What did Danny tell you?" Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Everything. Names, dates, locations, bank account numbers, 2 hours of testimony that could bring down a criminal organization spanning half the country." She slid the recorder across the table. "Danny made me promise to give this to you if anything happened to him." "What happened to Danny?" "He's dead, Mike. They found him in his cell yesterday morning. They say it was self-inflicted." The recorder felt heavy in my hand, like it was made of lead instead of plastic. "Why me, Sarah? Why not the FBI? Why not the police?" "Because half the FBI agents on the case are on that list I showed you. Because the police in this town are either dead or bought. Because you're the only person I know who's too stubborn to be scared and too honest to be corrupted." Tom was looking at his phone. "We need to get out of here. Now." "Why?" "Because there are 3 black SUVs in the parking lot that weren't there 5 minutes ago. Through the window, I could see men in dark suits getting out of vehicles with government plates. They moved with military precision, surrounding the building." "Back door," I said. We slipped out through the kitchen, past the startled cook and dishwasher, into the alley behind Murphy's bar. Tom's car was parked 2 blocks away, but the men in suits were already spreading out through the neighborhood. "This way," Sarah whispered, leading us through backyards I remembered from childhood. We moved through shadows and memories, past houses where I'd played as a kid, past the school where I'd met Sarah, past the church where we'd been married. We reached Tom's car just as the first black SUV turned onto his street. Tom started the engine and drove calmly through residential streets, obeying every traffic law, while men with tools searched for us 6 blocks away. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "Somewhere safe," Tom said. "Somewhere we can figure out what's on that recorder and what we're going to do about it." "There is no safe," Sarah said. "These people have resources you can't imagine. Money, connections, people in every law enforcement agency in the country. Then we better make sure we get to them before they get to us," I said. Tom drove us to a safe house outside the city, a nondescript cabin on a lake where federal agents sometimes brought witnesses who needed protection. We spent the night listening to Danny's confession, and by morning I understood why so many people were dead. The operation was bigger than any of us had imagined. Judge Harrow's little illicit escort operation was just one cell in a network that stretched from Mexico to Canada, moving girls, illegal substances, and money through a dozen states. The men at that poker table hadn't been local politicians playing at corruption. They'd been regional managers in a criminal enterprise worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And now they were all dead, except for Sarah, me, and Tom. "We need to go public with this," Tom said. "Every news outlet, every social media platform, every journalist who will listen. They'll end us before we get the chance," Sarah said. "Maybe. But if we do nothing, they'll end us anyway." I looked at the recorder in my hand, thinking about the girls whose lives had been destroyed by the people I'd trusted. Thinking about my wife, who'd been both victim and perpetrator in a nightmare I was just beginning to understand. There's another option, I said. What? We make them come to us, on our terms, in our place, with our rules. Tom raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to finish what we started in that casino. But this time, we're not just taking down the local corruption. We're taking down the whole network. Sarah stared at me. Mike, these aren't small-town criminals. These are people who end federal judges and make it look like an accident. Then we better make sure we're smarter than they are. I stood up and walked to the cabin's window, looking out at the lake where I'd learned to fish as a boy. The water was calm and clear, reflecting the morning sky like a mirror. Behind me, Sarah and Tom were arguing about the safest way to surrender to federal protection. But I wasn't interested in safety anymore. I was interested in justice. And justice, I was beginning to understand, sometimes required a man to become something he never thought he could be. The plan I outlined to Tom and Sarah was simple in concept, brutal in execution. We were going to use Danny's recording to lure the remaining members of the criminal network into a trap, but instead of turning them over to law enforcement, which was compromised, we were going to destroy them the same way they'd destroyed so many others. You're talking about homicide, Mike, Sarah said. I'm talking about justice. There's a difference, is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Tom was studying maps of the area, marking locations and escape routes. It could work, but we'd need help. Professional help. What kind of professional help? The kind that doesn't ask questions and doesn't leave witnesses. I knew what he meant. During his years as an undercover federal agent, Tom had made contacts in the gray areas of law enforcement, people who worked for justice when the law wasn't enough. Can you reach out to them? Already did. They're interested. How interested? Interested enough to provide equipment, support, and cleanup. For a price. What price? Tom's smile was cold. Half of whatever we recover from the criminal network's assets. Turns out there's a lot of money in human trafficking. Over the next week, we planned the most elaborate revenge scheme I'd ever imagined. Using Danny's recording, we would contact the surviving members of the network and arrange a meeting. We'd tell them Sarah had information they needed, information that could save their operation. They'd come because they couldn't afford not to. And when they did, we'd be ready. The meeting was set for the following Saturday night at an abandoned warehouse outside town, the same warehouse where Judge Harrow's operation had processed girls before shipping them to other cities. Tom's contacts provided us with surveillance equipment, tools, and 3 men who looked like they'd been carved from granite. They called themselves contractors, but I knew what they really were. You sure about this, Mike? Tom asked as we prepared for the confrontation. I'm sure. Because once this starts, there's no going back. We'll be criminals, too. We're already criminals, Tom. The only difference is whether we're going to be victims or victors. Sarah was in the corner of the warehouse, testing the recording equipment that would capture everything that happened. She looked different now, harder, more focused. The frightened woman from Murphy's bar was gone, replaced by someone I didn't quite recognize. How many are coming? I asked. 7 confirmed, Tom said, including the man who's been running the operation from Chicago. What do we know about him? His name is Vincent Carbone. He's been trafficking girls for 15 years, has connections to organized crime families in 3 states, and has never been convicted of anything more serious than tax evasion. Tonight, that changes. At 9 o'clock, they started arriving. Black cars with tinted windows, men in expensive suits who move like predators. They thought they were coming to eliminate a problem. Instead, they were walking into their own destruction. Vincent Carbone was exactly what I'd expected, a man in his 50s who wore his cruelty like cologne. He looked around the warehouse with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Where's the woman? He asked. She's here, I said, stepping out of the shadows. But first we need to talk. Carbone's men reached for their tools, but Tom's contractors were faster. Suddenly, 7 criminals found themselves staring down the barrels of automatic tools held by men who ended for a living. Now that we have your attention, I continued, let's discuss the future of your operation. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Carbone snarled. Actually, I do. You're Vincent Carbone, age 53, originally from Detroit. You've been running girls through this region for 15 years. You've corrupted judges, police officers, and federal agents. You've destroyed hundreds of lives for profit. And tonight, you're going to pay for all of it. Sarah emerged from behind a stack of crates, the digital recorder in her hand. Everything you've done, Vincent. Every girl you've trafficked, every official you've bought, every homicide you've ordered. It's all here in Danny's voice with dates and details. Carbone's face went white. That recording will never see the light of day. You're right, I said. Because you're never going to leave this warehouse. What happened next was swift and methodical. Tom's contractors were professionals who understood that some problems could only be solved permanently. Within an hour, the criminal network that had terrorized our region for over a decade was gone. We found their financial records in Carbone's car, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, real estate holdings across the Midwest, and enough cash to fund a small war. All of it acquired through the suffering of innocent girls. What do we do with all this? Sarah asked, looking at the documents that represented millions in criminal assets. We use it to help the people they hurt, I said. Set up a foundation, fund shelters for trafficking victims, make sure their crimes actually accomplish some good. Tom's contractors handled the cleanup with the same efficiency they'd shown during the confrontation. By morning, there was no evidence that Vincent Carbone and his associates had ever been in that warehouse. The official story would be that they disappeared while fleeing federal prosecution. Their assets would be seized through civil forfeiture and distributed to their victims. The trafficking network would collapse without its leadership, and 3 people who'd been marked for death would get a chance to start over. 6 months later, I was back in Columbus. But everything had changed. The foundation we'd established with Carbone's money was helping trafficking victims across the Midwest. Tom had been promoted within the FBI and was leading a task force dedicated to dismantling human trafficking networks, and Sarah had disappeared. She'd left a note saying she needed time to figure out who she was without the lies and manipulation that had defined her life for the past 2 years. The note was postmarked from Seattle, but I knew better than to look for her there. I was finishing work on a housing project for low-income families when my phone rang. Unknown number, but somehow I knew who it was before I answered. Hello, Mike. Sarah? I saw the news about the foundation, about the shelters. You did something good with all that dirty money. We did something good. No, Mike, you did. I just helped clean up the mess I'd made. I sat down on a stack of lumber, looking out at the houses I was building. Real homes for real families who deserved a chance at happiness. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can help girls who went through what I went through. You didn't go through what they went through, Sarah. You chose what you went through. The silence stretched between us like an ocean. I know, she said finally. That's why I can't come back. Not to you. Not to that life. Not to pretending I'm someone I'm not. Who are you? I'm someone who helped destroy innocent lives for money. I'm someone who betrayed the best man she ever knew for the excitement of being part of something dangerous. I'm someone who needs to spend the rest of her life trying to make up for what she's done. Sarah, I'm divorcing you, Mike. The papers are already filed. You'll get everything. The house, the accounts, whatever's left of the life we built together. I don't want your guilt money. It's not guilt money. It's freedom money. Freedom for both of us to become who we're supposed to be instead of who we were. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 23 years of marriage dissolving like sugar in rain. Will I ever see you again? I don't know. Maybe someday, when I've figured out how to live with what I've done, when I've helped enough people to balance the scales. The scales don't balance, Sarah. That's not how it works. Then I guess I'll be helping people for the rest of my life. The line went dead. I sat there in the Columbus sunshine, surrounded by the sounds of construction and progress, and felt something I hadn't expected to feel, relief. For the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. I was a man who built things instead of destroying them, a man who helped families instead of tearing them apart, a man who'd been tested by the worst kind of betrayal and had chosen justice over revenge, construction over destruction. I was free. That evening, Tom and I met for our usual Friday beers. He could see something had changed in my expression. Sarah called? Sarah called. And she's gone. Really gone this time. Tom nodded. How do you feel about that? I thought about it for a moment, watching families at other tables, laughing and arguing and living their lives. I feel like I can finally start over, really start over instead of just running away from what I lost. Any idea what that looks like? I pulled out a business card I'd been carrying in my wallet for months. Thompson Construction. Building homes for families who deserve them, Tom grinned. Sounds like a good business. It will be. Honest work, honest pay, honest relationships with honest people. What about the other stuff, the foundation, the trafficking victims, all of that? That's important work, but it's not my work. My work is building things that last, creating something good instead of just destroying something bad. We drank our beers and talked about the future instead of the past, about the houses I was going to build, the families Tom was going to protect, the lives we were going to live as better men than we'd been before everything fell apart. Outside, Columbus was settling into evening. Families were going home to houses built by men like me. Children were playing in yards designed by people who cared about their safety and happiness. The world was continuing its ancient work of building and growing and becoming something better than it was. I'd lost a wife, a marriage, and a life I'd spent 23 years creating. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could survive anything, overcome anyone who tried to destroy me and build something better from the wreckage of what I'd lost. Vincent Carbone and his network were gone. Judge Harrow and his corruption were finished, Danny and his schemes were ended, and Sarah. Sarah was finally free to become whoever she was supposed to be. As for me, I was exactly who I'd always been, a man who built things with his own hands, who stood up for what was right, and who never backed down from a fight he didn't start but was determined to finish. The war was over. I had won. And now it was time to build something worthy of the victory.